Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up show time with Liverpool back in Premier League action after their ill-fated FA Cup exploits last weekend. This weekend we're taking on Brighton at the Amex Stadium on Saturday at 3 o'clock in a game which is of course incredibly important because it's important that we get back to winning ways after this little, what is hopefully just a blip that Liverpool have been going through. Of course we had the result against Wolves in the FA Cup, which is kind of fine because I don't think anyone was hugely invested in the FA Cup, and of course that killer blow, well not killer blow, but that horrible result we had to endure against Manchester City. Now, if Liverpool go out of that and then just carry on the way they are and, you know, get results against Brighton and Crystal Palace and everything's rosy, then that all gets forgotten about and, you know, it's just one little blip in a season that has otherwise been pretty fantastic so far. If we stay down, if we can't peel ourselves back up off the floor and get our act together, then suddenly we start looking at that City game and thinking, is that the moment where Liverpool choked, where they bottled it, where they suddenly lost the mentality that's got them this far? Because I think mentality is, of course, such an important thing in a title race. It's what's kept Liverpool going so far all the way through the season, is just this relentless winning mentality that they've had every single game we've just gone in, and you know, sometimes it's gone wrong, like the Burnley game where we were 1-0 down, the Everton game where it took us until stoppage time to score, but there was no point where you ever really felt like we were under the cosh, no point that you ever felt like we were genuinely in trouble. And anytime you did, I'm sure the squad didn't, because they just pulled themselves out of every difficult situation they've been put in. We nearly did it at the Etihad as well. Obviously we got that equaliser, and until City then scored, we looked like the better team. We looked like the team that might even go on to win the game, but what happened. We lost the game, fine margins didn't go our way and all that. We all know that happens, but what we've got to prove is that that has not affected the team mentality. The team still believes that these kind of games, the Brighton aways, should be not easy wins, but routine wins, in that even when it's difficult, even when the opposition does give you a proper game, you still come out the other side with a positive result, with 3 points that will absolutely crush the confidence of your rivals. Because of course Liverpool are playing before Manchester City and Spurs this weekend, and both of those teams do have difficult games. You know, Spurs have got a rejuvenated Manchester United side, although it is at Wembley. I think that is going to be a fantastic game. It's the first chance we get to see how Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is going to get on in like a really big game, rather than just against opposition that, let's be honest, he should beat, because that's all the games he's had so far. So it's going to be a difficult game for Spurs. City have got Wolves at home as well, and you know, Wolves have taken points, or got a result, at least if you include the FA Cup, against every single team in the top 6 so far this season, including that draw against City earlier on. So that is by no stretch of the imagination going to be an easy game for them. And of course it comes 2 whole days after us. So if we win, it puts so much psychological pressure on them. And of course, after beating us, they will have been thinking, you know, look, this is the moment where Liverpool fall away. This is the moment where their confidence is knocked and suddenly they aren't as absolutely brilliantly and relentless as they were earlier on in the season. But you only have to look back 2 seasons to what happened with Chelsea, where they put in that amazing winning run that I'm pretty sure City have now bettered now, but at the time I think they equalled the record. And then they had a game against Spurs, I think it was at White Hart Lane, they lost it, and everyone was like, oh, is this the moment where Chelsea fall away, where their momentum goes? But instead they just went out and went on like another ridiculous unbeaten run of games where they were just constantly winning, and they ended up winning the league at a bit of a canter in the end. So I think that's just what we've got to do. We've got to say, okay, our run is over now. Our unbeaten record's gone. Let's just go on another unbeaten run. So hopefully we can get the right result against Brighton and kick off another fantastic run of fixtures, run of results even, that might just power us to that all-important Premier League title. So team news going into the game. As we all know, Liverpool have got a bit of an issue at central defence. I think it's fair to call it that. I think injury crisis is one step away. I think the fact that Van Dijk is fine, and that will be, you know, a huge sign of relief for every single Liverpool fan, because he did of course miss out the Wolves game with, I think, what Jurgen Klopp deemed to be a slight knock, which I think is more just, you know, it's the FA Cup, we didn't really care about the game, and at the end of the day, why the hell would you risk him if he's not 200% fit for the match? So he is fine. I think that's what stops it being a crisis. If we lose Van Dijk at any point, then it does become a serious problem, because we don't actually have any central defenders that are old enough to drive a car legally on UK roads. At the moment, Van Dijk is fine. Dejan Lovren is not. He got that hamstring injury in the game against Wolves, so will be unavailable for this weekend. However, no time frame has been put on the injury, so who really knows when he's going to be back? I mean, Dejan Lovren, his fitness is so erratic, it's almost impossible to predict when he's ever going to be fit for Liverpool. I think the fact that he's got a hamstring injury, which sometimes can be serious, and the fact he's missing out this weekend, I wouldn't rule him out of the Crystal Palace game in a week and a half's time. I think he just seems to be that kind of player who gets a lot of injuries but seems to recover from them very quickly. I'm not a sports scientist. I don't know how on earth it works, but that seems to be the way it goes with Dejan Lovren. The other two centre-backs, Joel Matip and Joe Gomez, are close. Apparently Joel Matip is a little bit closer to fitness, but again, like with Dejan Lovren, this game just comes a little bit too early for them. So yeah, Van Dijk is the only fit centre-back we've got, but just because we've still got him, I think it does just about stop short of being a defensive injury crisis. So as for how I think Jurgen Klopp is going to line the team up to get around the injury problems we've got at the moment, obviously Alisson Becker in goal, you do not need me to explain why. Centre-back pairing, of course, this is I think what everyone's going to be keeping an eye on. I think it is fairly predictable. Obviously, Van Dijk starts. And then I think Fabinho definitely plays alongside him because it's either that or playing a youth player. And Fabinho did just about all right enough against Wolves to justify playing in this game as well. I think what you got to take away from the Wolves game is that he played solidly, and that was alongside a much changed back line. You know, that was with Moreno, Huerva, Camacho, Mignolet behind him, a slightly iffy, not very well balanced midfield in front of him as well that didn't really have any solid defensive players in it. And he fared absolutely fine. He didn't really put many feet wrong at any point in the game. So I think if you take him and put him with Van Dijk to marshal him through the game, you know, Van Dijk could play centre-back alongside a hat stand or a metal pole, and they'd probably be the best defence in the league still because he's just that kind of player. He's so good, and he just gives off that kind of confidence, that sense of assuredness that rubs off on the players around him. So I think him and Fabinho will probably be fine, although, you know, I don't want to say anything that's going to come back and bite me after the game. And then, of course, he'll be surrounded by good fullbacks as well. I think it's a recall, of course, for Trent and Robertson. They will definitely be coming back into this side. Now, there have been a few suggestions that maybe we do what we did against Brighton last year, because of course when we played at the Amex a year ago, we had a similar situation at centre-back where I think at the time Lovren was our only fit centre-half, so Klopp seemed to go a bit mad and decided to play Wijnaldum and Emre Can as auxiliary centre-backs. It ended up working. We played that back three and we won 5-1. So, you know, maybe he goes for a similar thing. You know, he certainly doesn't seem to be averse to going for something that seems a little bit wild under the circumstances. He didn't really seem to practice that back three at all. He just threw it out for the game, having worked on it a little bit in training, and it worked very well. So if he decides that he'd rather, I guess Wijnaldum would be the one who would come back and play in the centre-back role. If he decides that's how he wants to play it, then it's entirely possible. But I think the most logical thing to do would probably be to just stick with the back four, because of course it's a back four that's been fantastic. And if you're only changing one player, even though it is taking out a centre-back for a central defensive mid, I don't think you're creating too many problems. So that's what I think the back line is going to be. The midfield, I think, is going to be a two. I think it's going to be Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum. I think it's a bit of a weird one in that Fabinho being brought back to centre-back almost isn't as much of a problem in terms of having him at centre-back. It's more of a problem not having him in midfield because he is so important. We saw against Man City how much things changed when he came on, when he started to break the lines, play the right passes, get the best out of the players in front of him. Obviously, if he's going to do that at the weekend, he'll probably have to do it from a deeper role at centre-back. So I think there's an added pressure on Jordan Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum to do a few of the things that Fabinho offers going forward. And fingers crossed they can deliver it, because I do think he will be more of a miss than maybe some people realise, because he plays defensive mid, because it's not a role that looks especially glamorous, especially in games against lower league, lower table opposition. I don't think people realise just how important he is in terms of setting the tempo and delivering balls to the players in front of him and setting attacks going. So hopefully we can get a bye with that. I mean, Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum are, of course, fantastic midfielders, and I expect both of them to start the game in that little two in the double pivot. And then ahead of them, I think we're definitely going to go for the 4-2-3-1. I think this is the ideal kind of game to set up with that formation. And I think you go full strength with the players in the attack. You've got Shaqiri on the right, he has to play. Firmino definitely has to play. Mane on the left, and then Mohamed Salah as your centre forward. So taking a look at Brighton then, one little bit of quite interesting team news that they've had recently is the fact that they will not have their first choice goalkeeper available. Matt Ryan, who has been on and off reliable for Brighton. I think I never really thought he was amazing, but he is capable of having good games, and it would have been horrible if he'd had one of those against us at the weekend. But he is away. I think he's Australian. He's playing in the Asia Cup, which is essentially like the Euros or African Cup of Nations, any of those kind of tournaments. That still takes place in the middle of the season. They haven't moved it like they have with the Africa Cup of Nations yet. So he is away. I believe it's with Australia, which means David Button, who, you know, if you've ever heard of him, feel free to let me know in the comments what you think of him. The first I heard of him was, I think, yesterday when I was looking up team news for this game. But he will be the goalkeeper for Brighton this weekend. Now, I wouldn't get too excited by the idea of them maybe having some useless crab in goal who's never played football before. He played in the game, I believe it was against West Ham earlier on at like the very start of 2018. And I think he played in their last game of the year as well before the turn of the year. So, and he kept a clean sheet in the first one, did concede 2 against West Ham, but looked reasonably solid, you know, made saves that you'd expect him to make. Maybe a little bit culpable for the first goal that West Ham scored, where Arnautovic puts it through his legs. But he seems like a more than competent goalkeeper, certainly not the kind that Liverpool can just take pot shots at and hope for the best that one of them will get past him. I think he is a solid goalkeeper. Looking at Brighton in general, they are certainly a much better outfit than we were when we played them last season. I mentioned that 5-1 win at the Amex, and of course we beat them 4-0 at Anfield on the last day of the season as well. So I certainly can't see us putting 9 past them this season, if only also because we only put 1 past them in the game at Anfield earlier on the season. I think it's highly unlikely that we will score 8 in this game, although, you know, you never know, we might try and one-up or at least get close to what Manchester City achieved in their game against Burton Albion. But they are definitely more streetwise. You know, they don't leave huge gaps open defensively. They seem a much more cohesive unit. They've also got a set-piece threat as well. They showcased that against West Ham, where they scored from 2 corners in the space of like 130 seconds or something ridiculous like that to go 2-0 up, and both of them were the result of like second balls, you know, the kind of things that absolutely tortured us as Liverpool fans a few years ago, where every single corner it would come in, there'd be a knockdown or a dodgy clearance, and our players would just switch off and the opposition would just come in and whack one into a pretty much empty net. I mean, Mignolet was in goal, so essentially an empty net. Sorry, Sai. But yeah, they seem to have a bit of a set-piece threat about them. They've obviously got some centre-halves who know what they're doing in being big men that come up for the corners and stuff like that. And of course, they've got goals in them as well. You know, Glenn Murray is always going to be a little bit of a pest. I think with him coming up against Fabinho, if it was Van Dijk and Gomez, I wouldn't be too worried. I think between them, they would more than have enough to deal with Glenn Murray. But with it being Fabinho, I reckon Glenn Murray will try and target him. And I think they have got goals from elsewhere on the pitch as well. You know, Pascal Gross is a decent player, Knockaert as well. So we've got to be careful of them. They've had some decent results and decent performances against big teams at home as well. There was a recent draw with Arsenal. Chelsea only just scraped by them 2-1 recently as well. And of course, they beat that awful Man U side right at the start of the season in their first home game of the season. So we've got to be careful. You know, I think this is a game that I'm very happy is coming now and not in December, because, I mean, in December we did look at like the Wolves game as a bit of a banana skin and stuff like that. But I think if this game had come in that winter period, in the Christmas period where it got really, really hectic and we had so many games, I think Brighton will have almost slipped under the radar as a team that we maybe wouldn't have considered to be threatening, but have certainly got enough about them to pull off an upset. That period was the moment when they got that draw against Arsenal, so case in point right there. I think it's good that we've had a little bit more time to prepare. It's good that we're a bit more motivated as well because of that City loss, and I think it's just important that Liverpool go out there, and while it will be a difficult game, I'm not expecting 4 or 5-0. Just get a nice little 2-0 win, you know, keep a clean sheet for starters and score a couple goals, make it look like a reasonably comfortable win, and put the pressure on Spurs and Manchester City before their difficult games that they've got coming up. So I do think Liverpool will win the game, but like I said, I'm not really expecting a thrashing. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy it, as always, you know the drill. Hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Saturday evening after we've hopefully beaten Brighton and extended our lead at the top of the table. Until then, bye for now.